We are just days away from reaching 1,000 subscribers. If we achieve this goal in the next 15 days, we'll be able to keep the channel running and continue bringing you these stories. Your subscription makes all the difference. It's quick and helps us enormously. The Child of the Snows. Chapter 1. The Troubling Recognition. Belmont Castle, Savoy, March 1864. Spring was slow to chase away the last vestiges of a winter that had been particularly harsh in the French Alps. Duke Augustin de Belmont rode through the still snow-covered paths of his domain, inspecting the damage caused by avalanches and inquiring about the fate of his farmers after these difficult months. At 45, Augustin was an imposing man with prematurely silver hair and glacier blue eyes that reflected the hardness of these mountains he loved so much. A widower for 10 years, childless, he had devoted his life to managing his lands and the welfare of his subjects. A just but solitary man, he bore the weight of his lineage with a melancholy that all respected without daring to approach. That morning, accompanied by his steward, Pierre Moreau, he was heading toward the hamlet of Vallorcine, one of the most isolated communities in his duchy, to ensure that the inhabitants had survived the rigors of winter. The village, nestled at the bottom of a valley, was only accessible by mule or on foot during the harsh season. "My lord," said Pierre, pointing to the snow-covered roofs that appeared at the bend in the path, "it seems the village has weathered well. I see smoke from the chimneys." "God be praised," murmured Augustin. "I had feared the worst after that January avalanche." Indeed, a snowslide had cut all roads leading to the hamlet for 2 months, and the Duke was concerned about the fate of the 30 souls who lived there. The inhabitants of Vallorcine welcomed them with the respectful deference due to their lord, but also with sincere warmth. Augustin was not a distant noble. He knew each of his people by name and took genuine interest in their fate. "How did you spend the winter, Father Benoit?" he asked the village patriarch, a 70-year-old man who served as schoolmaster and unofficial sage. "With difficulty, my lord, but we managed. Thanks to your autumn provisions and solidarity, no one lacked necessities." "And little Marie Dubois, has her child been born?" The old man's face darkened. "Alas, my lord, the little one was born in December, but—" "But? He disappeared, my lord, on a stormy night. Marie had gone out to fetch wood. When she returned, the cradle was empty. We searched everywhere, but with the snow, the tracks—" Augustin felt his heart tighten. A newborn disappeared on a winter night. The chances of survival were nil. "Poor Marie has lost her reason," continued Father Benoit. "She refuses to believe the child is dead. She says she hears him crying in the forest, that she sees him in her dreams." "Where is she now?" "In her cabin, at the end of the village. But she no longer speaks to anyone. She spends her days staring at the forest, rocking a cushion as if it were her child." Augustin exchanged a saddened look with Pierre. These dramas were unfortunately too frequent in these remote regions, where nature showed no mercy. After distributing food and money to the most needy families, Augustin asked to be taken to Marie's cabin. She was a young woman of about 20, once pretty, but now emaciated by grief, with wild eyes that no longer seemed to see the real world. "Marie," said Augustin gently, approaching, "I have come to offer my condolences." She looked up at him with empty eyes, clutching a pillow wrapped in a wool blanket. "He is not dead," she murmured. "My little Jean is not dead. I hear him at night. He cries for me." Augustin felt his throat tighten at such distress. "Marie, you must accept." "No," she suddenly cried. "He lives. Someone took him. Someone is raising him far from here. I feel it, my lord. A mother feels her child." These words troubled Augustin strangely. There was in this broken woman's voice such deep conviction that it shook his certainties. That evening, back at the castle, Augustine could not banish from his mind the image of Marie and her desperate words. Something in him refused to accept the official version of the disappearance. "Pierre," he said to his steward, "this story troubles me. A newborn doesn't just disappear without leaving traces." "My lord, the December storm was terrible. It's possible that wolves, or that something else happened. I want you to conduct a discreet investigation. Question the inhabitants of neighboring villages. See if someone might have taken in a foundling this winter." Pierre nodded, accustomed to his master's intuitions, which often proved correct. 3 weeks later, Pierre returned with troubling news. "My lord, I found something strange. At St. Mary's Convent, in the next valley, the nuns took in a foundling in December, but they refused to say who brought him to them." "A foundling?" "Yes, an infant, about a month old, in good health, in a finely woven wicker cradle. The sisters say he was left at their door on a stormy night." Augustin straightened. "A wicker cradle. Describe it to me." According to Mother Superior, it was remarkable workmanship, with carved patterns and initials embroidered on the blanket. "What initials?" "J.D., my lord. Jean Dubois." Augustin's heart raced. "Pierre, we leave tomorrow for the convent." The next day, under a grey sky that still threatened snow, Augustine and Pierre rode to St. Mary's Convent. The abbess, Mother Teresa, an elderly woman with a piercing gaze, received them with the prudent courtesy due to a lord. But Augustine immediately sensed she was hiding something. "Mother, I'm told you took in a foundling this winter." "Indeed, my lord, a little boy, whom we called Francis. He is doing well, thank God. May I see him, and especially see the cradle in which he was found?" Mother Teresa hesitated. "The cradle. It's in our storage. Why this request?" "Call it intuition, Mother." She led them through the austere corridors to a storage room where various objects were kept. And there in a corner, Augustine glimpsed the wicker cradle. His blood froze in his veins. "This cradle," he murmured, approaching with trembling hands. "I know it." He caressed the finely woven wicker, examined the delicate patterns, the small wool blanket embroidered with the initials J.D. "My lord," Pierre worried, seeing his master's pallor. Augustine didn't respond immediately. His fingers had found something the others hadn't seen. Carved discreetly under the cradle, almost invisible, a small family coat of arms, the Belmont escutcheon. This cradle, he had seen it dozens of times in his late wife's apartments. It was in this cradle that she dreamed of rocking their child, the child they never had. But how did this cradle, left at the castle after Helen's death, find its way here, with a child who had mysteriously disappeared from Valorsine? The mystery took on a new, troubling dimension that overturned everything Augustine believed he knew about his past and present. Chapter 2. Secrets of the Past. "Mother," said Augustin in a voice he tried to control, "this child, may I see him?" Mother Teresa nodded reluctantly and led them to the small dormitory where the nuns cared for orphans. In a white wooden cradle slept a baby of about 4 months, with blonde hair and delicate features. Augustine approached and felt his heart tighten with inexplicable emotion. This little face. There was something familiar, something that reminded him of. "What age do you think he was when brought to you?" he asked. "A month, perhaps 6 weeks. He was in excellent health, well fed, visibly cherished. This was not a child abandoned from poverty." "And the person who left him?" "We didn't see them. In the morning, we found the cradle at our door with a note saying simply, 'Take care of him. He is innocent of everything.'" Augustine frowned. "You kept this note?" "Yes, in our archives." The note, written in an elegant but obviously hurried hand, bore no signature. However, Augustin recognized something in this handwriting that made his heart beat faster. "Mother, I must confess something to you. This cradle belonged to me. It was in my late wife's apartments." Mother Teresa's eyes widened. "How is that possible?" "That's exactly what I would like to discover. With your permission, I would like to take this child to the castle to conduct a more thorough investigation." "My lord, Francis is under our order's protection, and he will remain so if necessary. But I suspect this child has a history, a family, and that a grave mystery surrounds his presence here." After long negotiations, Mother Teresa agreed that Augustine could temporarily take the child, accompanied by Sister Margaret, a devoted nun who had cared for him since his arrival. The return to the castle with this mysterious baby created considerable excitement among the servants. Augustine had the child installed in the old nursery, those apartments that had never been used since his wife's death 10 years earlier. "Pierre," he said to his steward, "I want you to discreetly question all the servants who worked here 10 years ago. Who had access to the Duchess's apartments? Who could have taken this cradle?" "My lord, do you think someone from the castle is involved?" "I don't know what to think, but this cradle didn't fly away by itself." While Pierre conducted his investigation, Augustin delved into his late wife Helen's personal affairs. He had never had the courage to search through her effects after her death, but circumstances now demanded it. In Helen's secretary, he discovered letters, intimate journals, and especially a notebook he didn't know. Opening it, he was amazed to discover it was a correspondence registry with various charitable works. Helen, unknown to him, financially supported several orphanages and convents in the region. But more troubling still, he discovered letters exchanged with a certain Margaret, who seemed to be a close confidant. "My dear Margaret," he read in a letter dated a few months before Helen's death, "my hopes diminish each day. The doctors confirm I can never bear a child. Augustine doesn't know yet, but I see his sadness growing. How can I tell him our lineage will die with him?" Augustine felt tears rise to his eyes. Helen had suffered in silence, hiding her sterility so as not to sadden him further. The next letter was more mysterious. "If God wills it, I may have found a solution. You who know needy families so well, could you help me realize a project dear to my heart? I cannot say more in writing, but we will see each other soon." This correspondence stopped abruptly at Helen's death. Augustine examined the last letter, written in a trembling hand. "Margaret, time is short for me. If my hopes are realized one day, you will know what to do. The cradle is ready. Love will find its way. My lord." Pierre had returned from his investigation looking troubled. "What have you discovered?" "It's strange, my lord. Several servants remember that the Duchess sometimes received discreet visits from a common woman, a certain Margaret, who always came in late afternoon and left before dawn." "Margaret? Did you discover who she was?" "That's where it becomes interesting. According to old Thomas, the gardener, this Margaret was a midwife in the valley. She helped village women with difficult births." Augustin thought intensely. A midwife, who knew needy families, who was Helen's confidant. "Pierre, does this Margaret still live?" "Yes, my lord. Margaret Rousseau. She now lives in the village of Chamonix, but she's over 70 and no longer practices. We'll go see her tomorrow. And Pierre, arrange for Marie Dubois to come to the castle, discreetly." That night, Augustin didn't sleep. He wandered the castle corridors, haunted by 1,000 questions. In the nursery, Sister Margaret watched over little Francis, who slept peacefully in the wicker cradle. "What secret do you carry, little man?" murmured Augustine, looking at the child. "And what connection do you have with my late wife?" The child suddenly opened his eyes, eyes of a particular blue, the same blue as Helen's eyes, and seemed to smile at Augustin. This innocent smile moved the Duke more than any reproach. For the first time in 10 years, he felt that warmth, that tenderness he had thought dead with his wife. Tomorrow, he would go see Margaret Rousseau and finally discover the truth about this mysterious child of the snows. For he was beginning to suspect that little Francis wasn't there by chance, and that his late wife had perhaps woven an extraordinary plan for love and life to triumph over sterility and death. The cradle he had recognized was perhaps the key to a mystery greater and more beautiful than he dared imagine. Chapter 3. Margaret's Revelation. The next morning, Augustin and Pierre took the road to Chamonix under a sky finely clear that suggested spring's arrival. The journey through the valley took them 3 hours through paths still snowy but passable. Margaret Rousseau lived in a modest stone house in the heart of the village. Aged 75, she retained, despite her great age, a keen gaze and bearing that testified to a life devoted to helping others. When she saw the Duke appear on her doorstep, her face paled slightly, as if she had long expected this visit. "My Lord Duke," she said, curtsying, "it's an honor to receive you. Margaret Rousseau, I presume. I would like to speak with you about Helen, my late wife." The old woman's expression became troubled. "The Duchess. May God rest her soul. Come in, my lord, we'll be better inside to talk." The house was simple but clean, furnished with taste, despite the obvious modesty of her means. Margaret served them steaming herbal tea before sitting across from Augustine, hands clasped, visibly anxious. "Margaret, I found your correspondence with my wife. I know you were her confidant. I would like to understand what happened in the last months of her life." The old midwife sighed deeply. "My lord, some secrets are painful to reveal. More painful than ignorance. Yesterday, I discovered an abandoned child in a cradle that belonged to my wife, a child who mysteriously disappeared from Valoisine last winter." Margaret started and put her hand to her heart. "The little one. Is he well?" This reaction confirmed Augustine's suspicions. "You know something about him." "My lord, the Duchess had made me promise." "Helen has been dead for 10 years, Margaret. Promises made to the dead must not make the living suffer. Speak." Margaret rose painfully and went to a cupboard from which she took out a small casket. "The Duchess entrusted this to me before dying. She told me to give it to you when the time came. I believe that moment has arrived." The casket contained a sealed letter in Augustine's name, as well as several other documents. With trembling hands, Augustine broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Helen's handwriting, so familiar, leaped to his eyes. "My dear Augustine, if you read these lines, it's because my plan has been realized long after my death. I ask your forgiveness for this lie of omission, but my love for you and for our lineage pushed me to make arrangements you would never have accepted in your lifetime. I discovered my sterility shortly after our marriage, but I kept this secret so as not to break your heart. However, I also discovered something else. You have a brother, Augustin, a half-brother born of your father's youthful loves with a common woman before your birth. This man, Henri Dubois, lives in the hamlet of Valoisine. He is unaware of his parentage, but carries Belmont blood. He has married a local girl, Marie, and they are expecting a child. Margaret, who helps me in my charitable works, will discreetly watch over this family. If this child is born, and some misfortune should befall his parents, she will know what to do. The little wicker cradle I have prepared awaits him. Our lineage will not die out, my love. It will continue through your father's blood, through this child who will carry within him the future of the Belmonts. I know this revelation will overwhelm you, but believe in my wisdom and my love. This child will be yours by heart, if not by flesh. Love him as I would have loved our own son. Your wife who loves you beyond death, Helen." Augustin remained silent for a long time, tears flowing down his cheeks. Pierre and Margaret respected his emotion, understanding they were witnessing a crucial moment. "Henri Dubois," Augustin finally murmured. "He died last autumn in a hunting accident. His wife, Marie. She's the one who lost her child this winter." "No, my lord," said Margaret softly. "She didn't lose her child. I saved him." "How?" Margaret took a deep breath before recounting. "Henri had come to see me before his death. He was ill, sensed his end, and worried about his pregnant wife. He confided a secret to me. His own mother, on her deathbed, had revealed that his father was not the husband she had married, but a great lord who had loved her before his arranged marriage." "My father," breathed Augustin. "Your father. Yes." Henri had kept this secret all his life, but he wanted his child to know his origins one day. When he died and Marie gave birth in misery, I knew the Duchess had been right. "And you took the child?" "The night of the storm. Marie had gone out to fetch wood. I took advantage of her absence to take the little one. I left her a note saying he was safe, but she was too upset to understand. I took the child to the convent using the cradle the Duchess had prepared. But why not inform me immediately?" "Because the Duchess had told me to wait. She wanted you to discover the child yourself, for your heart to become attached to him before knowing the truth. She said love must precede duty." Augustin now understood Helen's wisdom. If he had been told brutally about this child's existence, he might have taken him in from obligation. But by discovering him mysteriously, by first becoming attached to him as a foundling, he already loved him for himself. "Margaret, this child, Francis. How can I be sure he truly carries Belmont blood?" In response, Margaret took a silver locket from the casket. "Henri had entrusted it to me before dying. It belonged to his mother. Look inside." Augustin opened the locket and discovered a miniature portrait he immediately recognized. His father, as a young man in his regiment's uniform. On the back, an inscription, "To my dear Elise, from your Auguste who loves you, 1815. "Elise was Henri's mother," explained Margaret. "She loved your father before he married your mother by family arrangement. Henri was born of this union, but was raised by Elise's husband, who accepted the child out of love for her." Everything made sense now. Helen had discovered this family secret and had orchestrated this extraordinary succession of events so a Belmont could continue the lineage. "Little Francis," said Augustin with emotion, "he is my nephew. More than that, my lord, if you officially adopt him, he will legally become your heir." Augustin rose, his heart beating. In his chest, immense joy struggled against incredulity. Helen, from the depths of her grave, had just offered him what she had never been able to give him in life, an heir and the continuation of his name. "I must return to the castle," he said, "and we must bring Marie. She has the right to know her son is alive and safe." Riding toward Belmont, Augustin felt his heart reborn to life. This little Francis sleeping in the nursery was no longer a foundling, but his own blood, the last hope of his lineage. Helen had succeeded in her final miracle. Chapter 4. The Mother Found Again. The return to the castle was for Augustin a journey of inner transformation. Each step of his horse brought him closer to a new reality. He was no longer a man alone and without heir, but the uncle and future adoptive father of little Francis. This revelation overturned his vision of the future and gave new meaning to his life. Arriving at Belmont, he found Sister Margaret in the nursery, giving Francis his bottle. The child, now 4 months old, had grown and his features were becoming more defined. Augustin observed him with new attention, seeking family resemblances he hadn't known how to see before. "Sister Margaret," he said gently, "look at his eyes, this particular blue." My wife had exactly the same color. And his smile. My lord, when he smiles, he looks like my father when he was young. I've seen portraits. The child, as if sensing they were talking about him, turned his large eyes toward Augustine and gurgled joyfully. This direct contact deeply moved the Duke, who instinctively extended his arms toward his nephew. "May I?" he asked the nun. For the first time, Augustine took Francis in his arms. The child nestled naturally against him, and the Duke felt an unknown warmth invade him. So this was paternal love. This protective tenderness, this pure joy procured by the trust of an innocent little being. "My little Francis," he murmured, "if you knew what miracle you represent." A sound of hooves in the courtyard interrupted him. Through the window, he saw Pierre returning from his mission with a woman veiled in black. Marie Dubois had finally arrived. Augustin entrusted the child to Sister Margaret and went down to welcome the unfortunate mother. Marie had grown even thinner since their meeting at Vallorcine. Her circled eyes testified to sleepless nights and constant tears. She looked around with the bewilderment of a simple woman entering a ducal castle for the first time. "Marie," said Augustin gently, "thank you for coming. I have something important to tell you." "My lord, Pierre told me you had news of my little Jean." "Yes, Marie, your son is alive. He is here in this castle in perfect health." Marie staggered and Pierre had to support her. "Alive! My little Jean is alive?" "Alive and well, but before introducing you to him, I must explain many things." They settled in the small salon where Augustin, with all possible delicacy, revealed to Marie the truth about her late husband's identity and the circumstances of her child's disappearance. "Henri was my lord's brother," stammered Marie, stunned. "Your half-brother, yes. Which makes your son my nephew and the potential heir to the duchy." Marie put her hands to her face, overwhelmed by the magnitude of these revelations. "But then, why did Margaret Rousseau take my child? To save him from a life of misery and ensure him the future his blood destines him for. But also, I admit, to give me the heir I never had. You want to adopt my Jean." Augustine saw panic seize Marie. "Marie, listen to me. I don't want to tear your child from you. I want to propose a solution that will make us all happy." "Which one?" "Stay at the castle. Become Francis's governess. We called him that at the convent. Let's raise him together. You'll remain his mother, I'll become his adoptive father. He'll grow up knowing his origin and destiny." Marie looked at him with incredulity. You would accept me at the castle? Me, a simple peasant? You are the mother of my heir and the widow of my half-brother. You have every right to be here. And if I refuse, if I want to take back my child and return to Vallorcine?" Augustine looked at her seriously. "Then I will respect your decision. But think, Marie, at Vallorcine, your son will be a fatherless orphan raised in poverty. Here he will receive a duke's education and inherit one of the most beautiful domains in Savoy. But he won't truly be my son anymore. He will always be your son. Simply, he will also be my heir." Marie remained silent for a long time, visibly torn between maternal instinct and her child's interest. May I see him before deciding?" "Of course." They went up to the nursery, where Francis slept peacefully in his cradle. When Marie saw her child, she let out a muffled cry and rushed toward him. The child, awakened by her voice, opened his eyes and smiled, recognizing his mother. "My little Jean, my baby," sobbed Marie, taking him in her arms. Augustine and Sister Margaret discreetly withdrew to let the mother reunite with her child. In the corridor, the Duke turned to the nun. "Sister Margaret, would you accept to stay at the castle for a while, until everything is organized?" "Gladly, my lord. This child has become very dear to me." To me as well, admitted Augustine, more than I would have thought possible. An hour later, Marie came back down, her eyes red but her expression more serene. Francis slept in her arms, soothed by his mother's found presence. "My lord," she said, "I accept your proposal, but on one condition." "Which one?" "That my son always knows the truth about his origins, that he knows Henri Dubois was his father, and that he was proud of his name despite his modest condition." "I promise you." "Marie, Francis will grow up respecting his father's memory as much as his future as Duke. Then we stay." This decision sealed Francis's extraordinary destiny. In a few days, he had gone from foundling status to ducal heir, while finding his mother and gaining a loving adoptive father. That same evening, Augustine had comfortable apartments prepared for Marie in the castle wing, reserved for governesses. For the first time in months, Marie ate her fill and slept in peace, knowing her child was safe. In his study, Augustine was already drafting the documents necessary for Francis's official adoption and recognition of his succession rights. But more than these legal formalities, it was the transformation of his heart that amazed him. By discovering this little being, he had rediscovered the joy of living and hope for the future. Helen had been right. Love must precede duty. He already loved Francis like his own son, and this sincere affection would make their future relationship authentic and happy. The cradle he had recognized had become the symbol of a renaissance, that of his family, his lineage, and his own paternal heart. Chapter 5. A New Family. The months following Marie and Francis's installation at the castle were a period of transformation for the entire Belmont domain. Augustine, who had lived 10 years in solitude and melancholy, rediscovered the joys of family life. The castle, so silent since Helen's death, now resonated with a child's laughter and his master's rediscovered happiness. Marie adapted remarkably well to her new life. An intelligent woman, despite her limited education, she quickly learned the castle's customs while maintaining her natural simplicity that charmed the servants. Sister Margaret, who had finally agreed to stay permanently, helped her in Francis's education and taught her the rudiments of reading and writing. "Look how quickly he's growing," Marie said to Augustine one morning as they watched Francis attempt his first steps in the great salon. At 8 months now, the child was vigorous and alert, already manifesting that quick wit characteristic of the Belmonts. "He has your determination, Marie, and the Belmont intelligence," replied Augustine with pride. "He'll be a remarkable man." Indeed, Francis was developing an endearing personality. A smiling and curious child, he seemed to flourish in the affection shown him by his 3 parents: his biological mother, his adoptive uncle, and Sister Margaret, who served as spiritual grandmother. The official adoption had been pronounced by Savoy's courts in spring 1864. Francis was now legally Francis de Belmont, heir presumptive to the duchy, while keeping mention of his true parents in his birth certificate. As promised, Augustin ensured Henri Dubois' memory was honored. "One day," he told Marie, "when Francis is old enough, we'll go together to his father's grave at Vallorcine. He must know his roots as well as his destiny." This generosity deeply touched Marie, who was becoming increasingly attached to this good man who had transformed her life's drama into miraculous resurrection. For it was indeed a resurrection that Helen had orchestrated from beyond. Not only had she ensured the continuity of the Belmont line, but she had also allowed her husband to rediscover the joy of living and paternal love. A particular event marked this blessed period: Francis's first birthday in December 1864. Augustine wanted to organize a modest but symbolic celebration for this important date. In the great salon decorated with garlands, the entire household had gathered: servants, close farmers, and even Margaret Rousseau, who had come especially from Chamonix. "My friends," declared Augustin, raising his glass, "a year ago this child we all cherish was born. His coming has brought joy and hope to this house. Let's drink to Francis de Belmont, our heir and our happiness." The assembly applauded warmly, while Francis, in his mother's arms, gurgled, contemplating the candles glowing on his birthday cake. But the most moving moment occurred in the evening, when Augustine, Marie, and Sister Margaret found themselves alone with the child in the nursery. "Marie," said Augustine solemnly, "I have something to propose to you." "What, my lord?" "Francis needs an official family name for his civil documents. Legally, he can bear either the name Dubois or Belmont, but I would like to give him a name that honors both his biological father and his mother." "I don't understand." "I would like to call him Francis Henri de Belmont. Henri in memory of his father, Francis as we baptized him, and Belmont for his future." Marie's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that? Honor Henri's memory. Henri was my brother, even though we never knew each other. He deserves his name to be perpetuated in his sons." This decision, which testified to Augustine's nobility of character, definitively sealed the harmony of their reconstituted family. During the winter of 1864-1865, another transformation occurred imperceptibly at the castle. Marie, who had first lived as a respectful governess, began to be treated with particular consideration by Augustine. She now participated in decisions concerning Francis's education, gave her opinion on estate management, and increasingly often shared the Duke's meals. The servants, observant as household people always are, noted this evolution with benevolence. "My lord is becoming attached to Madame Marie," confided Mrs. Dubois, the head housekeeper, to Sister Margaret. "And she, too, is beginning to look at him differently than a benefactor." It was true. Between Augustine and Marie, something deeper than mutual recognition was slowly being born. United by their love for Francis, they discovered they also shared tastes, values, a vision of life that naturally brought them together. Marie had lost her initial shyness and now expressed herself with assurance, revealing native intelligence and common sense that impressed Augustine. For his part, the Duke rediscovered, in contact with this simple and true woman, the capacity to be happy with life's small daily pleasures. One February evening, as they watched over Francis together, who had a slight fever, Augustine realized that Marie was no longer for him the mother of his adoptive heir, but a woman he was beginning to love. "Marie," he said impulsively, "are you happy here?" "Happier than I've ever been, my lord. Francis is flourishing. I found my place, and you're so good to us. Marie, may I confess something to you?" She raised her clear eyes to him, intrigued by the solemn tone of his voice. "When I lost Helen, I thought I could never love again. But you, your presence, your gentleness, your courage, you've given me back the capacity to feel my heart beat." Marie blushed and lowered her eyes. "My lord, you mustn't." "Yes, I must, because I'm beginning to believe Helen didn't only want to give me an heir. I believe she wanted to give me a new chance to be happy." This confession overwhelmed Marie, who had also felt feelings being born that she didn't dare admit to herself. Little Francis, in his cradle, gurgled softly, as if approving these words of budding love, for the child of the snows had accomplished more than his dynastic mission. He had brought together two solitary hearts and offered them the promise of happiness they no longer hoped for. Chapter 6. Love Consecrated. The spring of 1865 brought to Belmont Castle a transformation that escaped no one's notice. The growing affection between Augustine and Marie became evident, and the servants witnessed with tenderness the blossoming of this love, born in adversity and nourished by their common tenderness for little Francis. The child, now 15 months old, had become the castle's ray of sunshine. Walking confidently and babbling his first words, he already manifested that quick intelligence and natural nobility that characterized the Belmont line. But more still, he seemed to understand intuitively that he was the artisan of his adoptive parents' rediscovered happiness. "Look at him," Marie said to Augustine one morning as they watched Francis play in the garden under Sister Margaret's supervision. "He seems to know exactly what he's doing when he extends his arms to both of us at the same time." "He's a little diplomat," smiled Augustine. "He wants to keep us united around him." This apparently harmless remark contained a profound truth. Francis had indeed become the link that gradually transformed their trio into a true family. At the beginning of May, Augustine made a decision that would officialize this evolution. He summoned Pierre Moreau, his faithful steward, and Margaret Rousseau, who had come to spend a few days at the castle. "My friends," he told them in his study, "I wish to share an important resolution with you. I intend to ask Marie to marry me." Pierre and Margaret exchanged a knowing smile. This news hardly surprised them, so evident was this budding love. "My lord," said Margaret with emotion, "Duchess Helen would be so happy, she who dreamed of seeing this house rediscover joy and love." "Do you think it's proper?" asked Augustine, suddenly worried. "Marie is of modest origin, and the conventions—" "My lord," Pierre interrupted firmly, "you are duke and master in your own house. You can marry whom you wish, and if I may say so, Madame Marie has proven for months that she has the makings of a true duchess. Moreover," added Margaret, "she is the mother of your heir. What could be more natural than marrying your son's mother?" This encouragement comforted Augustin in his resolution. It remained to make his proposal to Marie, which worried him more than all the diplomatic negotiations he had conducted in his career. The opportunity presented itself that very evening, during their daily walk in the castle gardens. Francis slept peacefully in Sister Margaret's arms, and they had the habit, Marie and he, of taking a few steps together before bedtime. "Marie," began Augustin, his heart beating, "we must talk about our future." "Our future, my lord. Yours, mine, Francis's. We already form a family, in fact. I would like us to become one in law." Marie stopped walking and looked at him with stupefaction. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I love you, Marie, that I'm asking you to become my wife, the Duchess of Belmont, Francis's official mother, and perhaps the mother of other children, if God wills it." Marie put her hands to her face, overwhelmed. "My lord, Augustine, you cannot." "The difference in rank." "There is no longer any difference in rank between us," said Augustine firmly, taking her hands in his. "You are already the mother of my heir, the mistress of my house, the woman I love. Marriage will only officialize a reality that already exists." "But what will society say? What will your peers say?" "They will say that the Duke of Belmont has found love and happiness, and those who won't accept it don't deserve our esteem." Marie wept long in his arms, torn between joy and incredulity. "I'm so afraid of not being worthy." "You already are, my love. For months you've managed this house with more wisdom than many duchesses by birth." "And Francis? How will he react?" "Francis will be the happiest of all. He will finally have a real family, with a father and mother united by love as much as by the affection they bear him." The wedding was celebrated 2 months later, in July 1865, in the castle chapel. It was a simple but moving ceremony, in the presence of close ones and servants who had witnessed this extraordinary love story. Francis, in Sister Margaret's arms, seemed to understand the solemnity of the moment. When the priest pronounced the sacramental words that united Augustine and Marie, the child extended his little arms toward them, gurgling joyfully, as if blessing this union. "My friends," declared Augustine during the banquet that followed. Today is not only the day of my personal happiness, but that of our house's renaissance. Marie becomes Duchess of Belmont. Francis now has parents united by love, and our lineage will continue in joy and harmony. In the assembly, not a single voice rose to contest this marriage. All had witnessed Augustine's transformation, his renaissance to life and happiness. Marie, radiant in her wedding dress, perfectly embodied her new role as Duchess. On their wedding night, as they finally found themselves alone in the ducal apartments that Helen had occupied 10 years earlier, Marie asked Augustine a question that tormented her. "Augustine, do you think Helen approves of our union?" Augustine took her tenderly in his arms. "My love, I'm certain Helen orchestrated everything for us to find each other. She brought us together through Francis. She gave us time to discover and love each other. This marriage is her final blessing." To confirm these words, they heard Francis's cries in the adjoining nursery. Together they went to console him, finally forming this perfect family that Helen had imagined in her last moments. The child of the snows had accomplished his destiny, not only ensuring the continuity of the Belmont line, but also reuniting two solitary hearts in a love that would do justice to the memory of she who had made it possible. For certain miracles only come true with time, patience, and the wisdom of those who have loved us and love us still beyond death. Chapter 7. The Epilogue of Happiness. 10 years had passed since that stormy night when little Francis had mysteriously disappeared from Valorsine, only to reappear in a cradle recognized by Duke Augustin de Belmont. The autumn of 1875 found the castle in the fullness of family happiness that no one would have dared imagine a decade earlier. Francis Henri de Belmont, now 11 years old, had become a remarkable young man who was his parents' pride. Tall for his age, intelligent and curious, he already manifested that natural nobility characterizing his paternal lineage, tempered by the simplicity and kindness inherited from his biological mother. His education, entrusted to the region's best tutors, revealed exceptional dispositions for languages, sciences, and military art. "Look at him ride," said Augustine to Marie as they watched their son practice in the honor courtyard. "He has the assurance of a true Belmont, but also that prudence and respect for others you transmitted to him." Marie, now an accomplished duchess aged 35, radiated with maternal and conjugal happiness. She had given birth to 3 other children: Helen, born in 1866 and named in homage to the first Duchess; Auguste, born in 1868, a vigorous boy with his father's blue eyes; and little Catherine, born in 1871, who was the joy of the entire household. "Our family is blessed," replied Marie, squeezing her husband's hand. "4 magnificent children, and Francis who cherishes them like a perfect big brother." Indeed, Francis had welcomed each of his brothers and sisters with touching, protective love. Initiated early to his true origins, he showed no jealousy toward these children born of his adoptive parents' union. On the contrary, he seemed to understand he was the link that had enabled this happy family's formation. Augustine, now 55, had found in this multiple paternity a fulfillment he had never hoped for. His hair was entirely white, but his gaze shone with profound serenity. "Sometimes," he confided to Marie during their evening walks, "I wonder how I could live so long without knowing this joy. Our children are our most beautiful success." "Especially Francis," replied Marie. "To see this child I thought lost become such an accomplished young man, it's a daily miracle." That evening, as every evening for 10 years, the family gathered in the great salon for the ritual instituted by Augustine: gratitude toward Helen. Before the first Duchess's portrait, still enthroned above the fireplace, each child came to express their gratitude. "Thank you, Aunt Helen. said Francis with the solemnity of his 11 years, for allowing me to find my true family and for Papa and Mama to meet. Thank you for our parents, added the three little ones in chorus, who had grown up venerating this invisible benefactress. Augustine and Marie concluded together, Thank you, Helen, for this happiness you offered us. Your wisdom and love continue to bless our house. That year, Francis expressed the desire to know more about his paternal origins. Augustine decided it was time to take him to Vallorcine to pay respects at his biological father's grave. It was a moving journey through the autumnal mountains. Francis discovered the hamlet where he was born, the modest cabin where his biological parents had lived their love, and Henri Dubois' grave in the village's small cemetery. Papa Henri, said Francis, placing flowers on the tombstone, I didn't know you, but I promise to honor your memory as much as my future. The inhabitants of Vallorcine, who had followed the disappeared child's extraordinary destiny, welcomed Francis like a visiting prince. Father Benoit, now octogenarian, blessed the adolescent with emotion. You've become exactly what your father would have wanted, he said, a good and noble man who doesn't forget where he comes from. Upon returning from this pilgrimage, Francis expressed to his adoptive parents a request that touched them deeply. Papa Augustin, Mama Marie, he said seriously, I would like to officially add Dubois to my name. I want to be called Francis Henri Dubois de Belmont, so no one ever forgets I'm proud of both my heritages. This request, testifying to Francis's maturity and generosity, was immediately accepted. The young man now bore a name honoring both his modest origin and his aristocratic destiny. The year 1875 also marked an important milestone. Francis was officially presented to Savoyard society as the duchy's heir. During a grand ball given at the castle, the region's noble families discovered this young man of perfect education and natural charm, who won everyone's admiration. My lord, said the Count of Chambéry to Augustin, your son honors your name. How did you succeed in making him such an accomplished gentleman? By raising him in love and truth, replied Augustine simply. Francis knows his origins, his destiny, and his rank's responsibilities. This honesty gives him strength that children born in ease don't always possess. The evening's highlight was the speech Francis gave before the guests' assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, he said with the assurance of his 11 years but an adult's wisdom, I am Francis Henri Dubois de Belmont. My name tells everything about my story. Born Dubois of a common man who carried Belmont blood, become Belmont through adoption and love. I promise to serve our duchy, always remembering that true nobility doesn't come from birth, but from acts and heart. These words of striking maturity moved the entire assembly and confirmed the duchy's future was in good hands. The evening of this triumph, when the family found themselves alone, Augustine took Francis in his arms. My son, he said with emotion, you've exceeded all my hopes. You'll be a magnificent duke. Thanks to you, Papa. Thanks to you and Mama, who taught me that love can transform all destinies. That night, Augustine and Marie gazed long at Helen's portrait before going to bed. She had foreseen everything, murmured Marie, down to Francis's personality, to our happiness. She orchestrated a masterpiece. The masterpiece of love, agreed Augustine. For all this happiness was born of her love for me, for our lineage, for our house's future. 20 years later, when Francis became duke in turn and married a young woman he loved passionately, he perpetuated the tradition instituted by his parents. Every evening, before Helen's portrait, he thanked she who had made this happy lineage possible. And in Belmont Castle, they continued to tell the extraordinary story of the child of the snows, of this cradle recognized by a duke who had thus discovered his heir and his happiness. for certain mysteries are only love, borrowing secret paths to accomplish its most beautiful miracles. This cradle, I know it, the Duke had said upon finding the disappeared child, and in this recognition had been revealed the most beautiful secret, love that survives death and continues working for the happiness of those it cherishes.